Okay, so this is number 4 in the sequence, if you like, of me messing around with PBR Painter. And today I made this, and a very basic model, and I textured it in PBR Painter. So tonight I'm going to attempt to go through my process to get to this stage here. It's a little bit more complicated, well, not so much complicated, but more comprehensive, because I've got about 6 layers altogether in here. So it works really well, and well, I'm quite pleased with it. For me, anyway, I'm quite pleased with what I was able to produce using the PBR Painter tool. So without further um, hesitation, let's get started. Okay, so once again, here we are in Blender with a basic model, and I will just show you what it is made of. Essentially a disk using the primitives disk, and a bit more comprehensive on the top here. But the main thing, this is obviously something that pretty much anybody can do with a little bit of experience in Blender. But the main thing which you must have before embarking into PBR Painter is a good texture map. And so this is the one I created for this particular oil drum, and you will notice that I've just made a couple of indents in it, like so, just to make it a little bit less perfect, which works quite well. So let's go straight on to texture paint, and the first thing we're going to do is we go to set up material for PBR Painter, and we're not going to use the backup current material or use current material as background because there's nothing of any value on them. So we add a layer, and we will call this base color, and we'll do 2K because we're actually going to paint on this particular one and not use any masks, and go OK, and we'll just activate the base color, and we'll make this a sort of yellowy color, which is the color I made it to start off with. In fact, we won't use painted, we will use procedural, but just to give it a little bit more less uniform. So I've got a colour here which I did originally, and rather than having the yellow, we'll go for the yellow again, but we'll just make it a little bit less, a little bit darker. And we'll preview the texture on the mesh. You can see it's just breaking up ever so slightly, so let's do a little bit more, let's make it a little bit noisier. In fact, let's play around this. Never quite sure what I'm doing with this. There you go, that's starting to work a bit better. Just want it quite subtle, nothing too obvious. And so there is our base colour, and let's just fill it, and that's looking pretty good. So for the next layer, we will add a decal of the kind of toxic waste symbol, and I've got one I made actually earlier, which I'm just going to drag into drag this in here just so it's there, and for this one we will actually of course make a new layer, and we'll do this one 4K because we're only going to be using little bits of the image and it needs to be quite high quality ish, so I think 4K would be okay. And we'll call this radioactive waste. Let's try again. Radioactive waste. Go OK. And we'll just go to the brush settings and we'll use a texture but not a organic texture. We'll use where are we? Image or movie, and then we'll look for our radioactive waste label, which we've got there. We'll make sure it's on stencil, which it is, and stencil image or movie needs to be on paint here as opposed to fill, and if you use the right mouse button you can drag the stencil around. So we're going to just stick it on a few places. I'm going to switch to the orthographic projection so I don't get any twisting, any stretching on my something like that will be fine. And just make my brush a little bit bigger to cover the whole thing. Just click once, give it a second or two. Oh, try that again. Okay, make sure I'm on paint, not erase. And make sure base color is switched on. There we go, I've actually been painting. Let's just undo that. Could have just filled it actually, but it's not going to make a lot of odds. Just make sure with straight again. Make sure I'm on paint. And try again. There you go, that's what I was looking for. I just realised I had the brightness down on the image. Couldn't understand why it was so dark. So now let's make the brush a bit bigger and click, and there we go. Let's turn it round to the other side approximately and click, and then let's go to the top. Let's put one there. Paint. Wait for a second or two. I don't know why that one particularly takes a while to do. My computer's not the fastest computer in the world. So there we go. There we go. We've got our two starting layers. Base color, radioactive waste. For our next color, our next layer, we want to add some grunge, some darkness into all the bits here, some real dirt and kind of blackness and yuckiness. So we will make a new layer, and we will call that grunge. Make it on 1K. Don't really need the high size for this one, because we're just going to use the fill tool. We're going to go to base color, and I think for the base color we'll go for a procedural as well. I think this is what I did before, and let's fill it so we can see what we're doing. And I think that will do, and we'll change the roughness to that on that one as well, and we'll do that procedural preview, procedural texture on mesh. We pretty much want the same as we've got actually. In fact, so I could copy it. You can copy it just by using this little option here, but just for the sake of me dialing up a few numbers, so as this is the roughness, I don't want it to be shiny really at all for this matte material, so we want to whack that colour right up. So we're just giving a slight variation in our roughness map, and that will be absolutely fine, I think. Just going back to base colour for a little bit. Okay, that would do. We're not going to see a lot of it anyway because it's going to be covered in rust and stuff. I wonder why that's not. Oh. Whoops. There you go. That's what you do for you don't really know what you're doing. Hit undo. Layer settings, base channel, procedural. That should be all filled. There you go. Okay, so that's the actual colour for our grunge, but now we need to create our grunge mask to show the bits that we just want to show. So for that we'll go down to our add new mask, and we'll make this a preset grunge, for which we need cycles, and we need to turn the cycles on, and we need to go to the cycles renderer to see it, and we need to turn on preview selected mask on mesh, and so I need to make it a lot more visible than it is. I kind of want it a lot, like I say, it's going to be a lot of it's going to be hidden anyway, but I think think that will do. We can brighten it a little bit later. Let's just try the contrast. Okay, that's not good. Back to where it was. I like the scale, I just would like it a little bit brighter, but you can multiply the actual mask later, so I'm going to trust that that's going to be sufficient. And so for use in Eevee and for speed, we will flatten that down by merging the visible mask, and we'll do 2K again, just because things start slowing down a lot on my computer anyway. Okay, that's done, so we'll switch back to Eevee, back to our normal renderer, and let's just have a quick preview of that mask. And that looks pretty good. That's kind of what I wanted to get to. Yep, so let's unhide that, and we can see where it's showing through. It's not sufficient, in which case I think the mask multiplier will be the way forward with this one. So here under base color we have the mask multiplier. I really want to bring that out a lot. And that's pretty much where I want it, but I didn't want it to be quite so plain, so rather than changing the mask, because I quite like the way the mask is working out this far, I think we'll go back to our colours and we'll make some obvious, a bit more obvious noise in there. Okay, that will do. Good. So we're moving on. Going to move on to the next mask. Okay, our next mask is going to be the rust mask. So the first thing we need to do is actually create the rust. I'm going to say rust all the time. Rust texture. So let's add a layer. Let's call this rust. 1K again, because we're just going to fill it. We're not going to use it as an actual painting layer. And we'll go to base color, and we will do the procedural. This is pretty much like the rust tutorial I did the other day, and it's just a matter, let me just fill it now so we can, at the moment I'm using black and white, as you can see. So initially we can get our kind of contrasty rust look that we want, our procedural noise. I think that's okay. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So I've got some colours. These are the next colours I'm going to do on here. All the ones I nicked from Will's rust tutorial with his Suzanne head, the monkey head. So I'm literally going to type in the exact same details as Will has. So for this first one, it's 0.337, and the colour itself and the hue, saturation and value is 0.067, 0.952, 0.221, and the next one we'll add is going to be position 0.418, and those colours are, the hue, saturation and value are 0.078, 0.762, 0.070. I did play around with my own colours, but for some reason they never looked as good. So I just went back to Will's and they work fine. If you don't know who Will is the creator of the the genius behind what is PBR Painter. And the final one, this one here, 0.645, 0.028, 0.914, 0.234. And there we go, there's our rust, looking pretty good. And so for this next one I am actually going to copy that, copy procedural setup. And I'm going to go to the normal here. And do you know what I'm not going to? I was going to paste it in here, but I'm going to use the link to mask later on. I've just remembered that's the way that Will did it, and it actually looks a lot better than what I was going to do. So that's the actual rust layer, which looks pretty good. It's not bumped at the moment, there's no kind of normals on it, so it doesn't look as good as it should, but it will. Trust me, it will. So the next thing to do is we need to add a layer mask, or a few layer masks in this instance. So add new layer mask, and we'll make this one ambient occlusion. Go OK, and this one once again needs to use the Cycles render engine. Let's do preview selected mask on mesh. And we want a lot of this. I think we just want to whack this right up. Okay, so this is going to be our first one, which is good. I'll just bake that one, or merge that one, should I say. Okay, the next one is going to be a geometric one. And we'll preview this one on the mesh as well, and we're going to keep this one as a simple geometric mask, the simple curvature here as opposed to the other options, and we just want a little bit of an edge on this one, so I'm going to bring the white and the black together. More black than white. So I'm just getting the actual rim on this one, which I quite like so. That's pretty good. So we'll bake that one as well. Going to rename these. Oh, do you know what? Can I undo? Can I please let me undo? Okay, I did something really silly. I merged them together and I can't undo it. So I'm just going to pause and redo that. Hang on a second. Okay, so this is where I was, and sillily enough, I had them both selected, and when you click on this for merge visible masks, of course that one was visible, but I want to keep them separate because I want to use them later. So I'll just bake that one on its own, and going to rename this one to geometric mask. And then the last mask we'll have, and we don't need cycles on for this one, is a, where are we? The last mask will be a simple geometric mask. Not geometric, beg your pardon, procedural. and we'll preview it on the mesh again. And once again, let's play around with some details. I think that looks pretty good. Just a I'm faffing. That would do. That would be fine. So now let us preview them all together, and using the mask stack color ramp. This is the stack of them together. We'll just want to create that kind of nice look where we have a bit of rust all over, but more so on the kind of edges and in the nooks and crannies, as it were. Yeah, I think that'll do. Should we have a look and see what that looks like? Okay, as usual, it's not showing as much as I expected it to, so the way I found to deal with that is to use the mask multiplier. So on our rust layer, base color, mask multiplier, until that starts to come through. I think that's about it. That looks pretty good, doesn't it? Now if we use the normal link to mask, we should get a fairly good look when it decides to show itself. I've noticed on my computer that things do take a little bit slower the more layers we have, but hey, look at that, that's not bad, is it? What do you think? Got a bit of paint showing through here, so I think that's just a matter of working on some of those masks from earlier. Normally that's because it's kind of flattening out the whites and the mask. So if I go back to the mask, preview mask, tell a lie, that actually looks okay. Do you know what that is? That's that black on my other layer. So let's just see if I can play with that a little bit, the grunge layer. Yes, I could have done with, I don't know, that's not too bad. Just excuse me for fiddling and faffing. This is really A lot of this is quite new to me as well, so if you're kind of doing this with me, you just have to forgive me for trying to find out how things work on the fly. Okay, so what I'll do, I think I'll just add a procedural image to this particular mask, and let's preview that. Just want to break it up ever so slightly. Preview them together. Okay, I can live with that. That's pretty good. Okay, so if I could play with it all evening and still not find I'm getting anything that looks any better than I've got, so let's move on to the next one, which happens to be the what I call the decal layer, or the drips around the top. Now I played with the doing this procedurally, and whilst I kind of got something that looked okay, it didn't look as good as an bitmap image which I then imported from texture.com, I think it's called. Let me go and see what if I can find the link. So yeah, textures.com. So you have to sign up for it, but you get to download the textures free up to a certain point. They're very kind of low, the lowest of the low res ones, but in fact it was this one that I downloaded. So I downloaded this one, and I'm just about to show you what that looks like. Come back to Blender. So the decals, let's just go to the editing for a moment, and the decal, where are you? Decal, textures.com. There you go. You can just about see it here, but what I did was I actually made it a square texture, so that I could use it properly in the texture paint mode, which I'm about to do now. So the way I did that was to make a new layer, of course. Let's start by doing that. It needs to be a fairly decent size. I would say probably 2K. I think it's quite a small image I've got anyway, so it's no point in me going too high. Let's call this decal. Okay, and going to use the base color, and we're going to use the painted. No, we're not going to use. Why did I say that when I just said we're going to use a texture? So we're going to use a texture, and the texture we're going to use is that particular one, wherever you are, there. And we're also going to use the same texture as a mask. But rather than use the color, we're just going to make it really bright. And the reason we're not seeing anything at the moment is because I need to fill it with that texture, which is there. So we just need to manipulate it and move it into place. So we can start by going down to the texture panel, down here where we have type, And the first thing we need to do is rotate it, move it along a little bit. Now you can see two at the moment because I've got the mask and the, let's just preview this one. Okay, there you go. Oh no, don't want that one. Gosh. Oh, can't actually preview that one. I'll tell you what I'll do, I'll go down to the image texture and do that one first. And I think that works quite well. So it says a bit higher. And then we've got a nice grungy look there, so 0.480. And they should match up now. And of course, as usual, the mask multiplier comes in handy. There you go, that's pretty darn good, isn't it? And so we're almost there now, we've almost finished. So just to finish off, we'll just add a little bit of an opening spill to the tops here, so we kind of get the same sort of colour around here, so it looks like sort of a bit more oily. In fact, that I can probably make that a bit darker. I think we'll use the use these tools. There you go, that's better. So we're almost there. Next layer, we're just going to paint this bit, just going to paint a little bit of darkness on here. So we'll call this opening spill. Probably wants to be 4K. I know that sounds a lot considering it's just there, but the actual map itself is going to be that size. So we'll go OK, and we'll look at our brush and use the brush texture again, but not to that particular one. Let's go to, let's try, where are you, clouds, there. F to scale the brush down. Make sure I'm on paint and not erase, which I was. Okay, and nothing's happening. Okay, let's turn base color on and let's make it black, or at least blackish. Okay, let's erase what I've done because that obviously doesn't work. Back to paint. Just look at our brush settings again. Brush texture. Okay, don't want stencil on, just want normal tiled. We should. There we go. I don't want a lot, just to look like it's been well used. something like that would be absolutely fine. And last but by no means least, we will just add a base layer, a kind of dark gungy black layer at the bottom, as if it's been left in puddles, etc. for a while. So back to our layers. We're almost finished. In fact, let me save this. Save it as O2. And new layer, base grunge, 1K, OK, primary base color, constant. Should we do constant or should we do yeah, let's just do constant for now. Make it black. Or at least quite dark. Fill. Let's also change the roughness of this. Okay, and so the final thing to do is to make a mask, and we'll just start off with a procedural, not a procedural, I don't know what I'm talking about, a gradient. Go OK, preview selected mask on mesh, and we've got this gradient working vertically from left to right, so we want it horizontal, so we need to play with the rotation. Let's do 90. Let's move it, actually let's invert the colours. Oops, wrong one, sorry, I knew that was wonder what was going on. So we're just going to have it kind of working its way up from the bottom. That looks pretty good. And then finally, just to mix it up, once again, our nice procedural mask, which is, hey, we're going to use the noise again. I think for this sort of rust kind of procedural texture anyway, the procedural textures here work really well. So let's just see what they look like together. So we just need to tighten them up, not so much at the top. A little bit won't hurt. Okay, and finally mask multiplier. Yep, tiny bit too much. Jumped then. I think that will do. I think we'll call it a day there. So there you go. There's another tutorial, kind of tutorial, messing around tutorial for PBR Painter, which for me, I'm quite pleased with the overall result. So what I'll do this time is I will export both scenes, this one as it is for anyone who has PBR Painter, and the compressed version with just the outputted maps, so to speak, the base color, the metallic, the roughness, and the normal. So once again, thanks for listening, and I hope you come up with something even better than I've done. And what's so good about this is, let's backtrack for a second, is I've produced one oil drum here, but nothing's set in stone here. So going back to texture paint mode just for a moment, base color, well, let's change the color. Let's do, before I do that, let's just save it in case I really mess up, and let's do red. Great, it's one without rust. Not so good, that one though. We could take the decals, the spill off, and so on and so forth. You could remove the decals. You could change the stickers. What's so good about this is it's really it's reusable, non-destructive and reusable time and time again. You're not just limited to just one, and of course if you don't like the rust there, you can go to the rust layer, and you can play with the noise, the position of it, the amount. You don't want so much, go back down to the mask. You've got the overall mask stack. You can take the rust down a little bit. You want just a little bit of rust, you could have the rust have a lot more rust, and so on and so forth. So for me, it's a no-brainer. It's a win-win situation every single time. The only thing I would say, sorry, I'm just talking a lot, I know. The only thing I would say is on my PC, as I'm starting to add more layers, especially some of the higher resolution layers, it does slow down a little bit. It takes a little while to redraw, but I can definitely live with that, and until the GPUs get a bit cheaper and more available, I'm stuck with my old GTX card, which probably doesn't help. So I'm going to stop talking there. I hope that it has provided some sort of information and would help you to move on with your own PBR painting, whatever you're doing.